Surviving racism, homophobia, and childhood trauma, Carl Bean found his voice through song. First as a gospel singer in Harlem's Christian Tabernacle Choir, and then later performing with his group, Carl Bean and Universal Love, on the 1974 Universal Love album. But along the way, he created what has become an anthem for the gay, lesbian, transgender, and queer community called I Was Born This Way. This song lives on, and so does the spirit of Carl Bean. We're joined today by the co-directors of this wonderful film, I Was Born This Way, Daniel Junge, as well as Sam Pollard, and one of the producers, Wellington Love. To all of you, welcome to Cinemaphile.
Thank you very much, Mike.
This was such a jolt, such an energetic film. Congratulations on the vibe that comes off of this film. And I did not know who Carl Bean was until this. And my congratulations. I will start with, I believe, Daniel, as to the origin of the project. How did this come about? Who started this process?
Yeah, it originated with me. I was working in television and developing a series on social action and music, and one of the episodes was going to be on sex. And for me, the first person that came to mind was Lady Gaga. Sex and gender, Lady Gaga's Born This Way was really the LGBTQ plus anthem of my era. And in researching that, I found that that song was an homage of hers to an earlier song and to the guy who sang it. And that's how I learned about Carl and was really fascinated. Well, that series never happened, and his story really stuck in my head. And for some reason, I thought he was in the Midwest, and I researched a little further, and he was in Los Angeles, right down the street. His church was right down the street from where I lived. And so I reached out to him, and within a couple of months, we were making the film. I will say this has been an odyssey. It's taken 6.5 years. Sam and Wellington both joined within about a year or two, coming on first Sam and then Wellington. And Sam is, we've collaborated on a film in the past, and obviously incredible filmmaker. So happy to have him on board as co-director.
Well, Sam, I'll ask you, when and how did you become familiar with Carl Bean and his work?
Well, like you, Mike, I had never heard of him, until Daniel introduced me to the interview that he had shot with Carl. And I sat and listened to the interview and I said, wow, who is this guy? And I've been around quite a long time, as you know. But, his story is the way you just described it is pretty phenomenal, and I applaud Wellington and Daniel for the tenacity and the stick-to-itiveness to make this thing happen. I mean, it takes a long time to make these films. And you got to have a certain level of tenacity to make it happen. And this is a great team. I got to say that right from the top, that this is a wonderful team of filmmakers to work with. This is a beautifully, beautifully crafted documentary. Daniel leaves no stone unturned, and that's what I've known him for quite a long time, and he's always been a wonderfully superb filmmaker. And Wellington's a great producer, so it's been a pleasure. I mean, Carl Bean, growing up in Baltimore, going to New York, then going to Los Angeles, then doing, what you said, playing with the choir, singing with the choir, and then having his own band, and then doing I Was Born This Way, which was sort of a big kind of disco hit in the 70s. It's an amazing journey. And the fact that he becomes an activist, he becomes a political and social activist. And it shows you how special Carl Bean was.
What struck me about Carl is he walks the walk, he talks the talk. He is a man of love. From the moment we see him on screen, you get this sense of him as a person. And throughout the time we're with him, going back to his roots and all the rest of it, he remains consistent. He's just a beautiful human being. Tell me a little bit about your exposure and how you got to know Carl.
Yeah, as Daniel said, he's so much about love. And Sam just talked about he didn't know much about him until he saw the very first interview that Daniel had done. And that's the same for me. And I'm embarrassed to say because I came of age in New York at the height of the AIDS crisis. I was involved in ACT UP, was making kind of grassroots like video and very involved, in activism. And so I knew a little bit about the song. I got sent what was the initial sort of hero reel of Carl Bean. It was just basically a single shot that Daniel had did as a kind of fundraising tool. And here was this magnetic, charismatic man just rolling out his life, telling us his story, the good and the bad, the highs and the lows, but all with a smile, all with so much love, all with so much compassion. It didn't take much for me to say, how can I help? How can I make sure other people know about this man who did all, from his work in AIDS, Minority AIDS Project, founding the first LGBTQ ministry with Unity, obviously all his musical work. And to this day, now that we've screened the film in a number of festivals and so many people, so many of my peers and so many have come up to me and say, I didn't know anything about this guy, all of whom were, supposedly sophisticated, educated, people, who were from academics to artists to architects. So anyway, so all that to say is that it has been, an amazing journey for me over the last 4.5 years working with this great team. Sam says, none of us gave up. We had some moments with this film. It's independently financed, produced, done, bootstrap, but we were determined to get it done. Again, a testament to, the phenomenal team.
What you're describing is true to the spirit of Carl Bean, from
Yeah.
where he came from, in terms of how he came into this world, the travails and trauma that he experienced, and through it all, he persevered. It seems to be kind of a theme, what I think you're describing here. Daniel, let's talk about the song. I was born this way. Sort of talk about it as this sort of how it morphed, how it started, and how it became, as it's described in the film, an anthem.
Well, it was an instant hit in gay clubs. That didn't necessarily transfer over to mainstream popularity because we're still back in the, top 40 radio days. But almost any queer person of a certain age knows that song from dancing in clubs. And then since then, which as we showed in the film, it's become remixed, it's been found and refound and that's why Questlove is interested in it. That's why he's on board as an EP and in the film is he's one of those guys who's it's one of the staples of his DJ set. And we include a DJ who's done remixes of it. It's become a dance staple, just because it's got such a great groove. And so originally I think it was the message of the song that punched through. And I think since then it's been the message and the music.
Where did Motown come in? Barry Gordy stepped in. I don't want to give too much away in terms of the story here, but there was a key element to this that Motown played in this.
So Motown had they didn't have the rights to the song, but they had distributed an earlier version by Valentino, which is in the film as well. We get to take all these little side journeys into the origins of the song because those people all have great stories as well. The Valentino that version never really took off. Disco was happening, and this is speculation on our part. I'd love to hear what Sam thinks as well because he's much more a musicologist than me. But I don't think that Barry Gordy was like, I need to, carry the torch for gay rights. I think that they were maybe faltering a little, and disco was ascendant, and they wanted to get in that game.
That was the situation. I mean, Barry Gordy was one of these gentlemen who was about trying to make money and make hits. And you had to pull him to change up his sort of musical taste. I mean, everybody knows the legendary story of how he was opposed to Marvin Gaye doing What's Going On. And he probably just saw the writing on the wall that this song might have some traction. And luckily it did. I'm glad he produced it and put it out. And I'm glad it introduced us to Carl Bean.
Oh, go ahead, Wellington. In terms of just how this song took off, you mentioned in discos, sort of a gay clientele that was locked onto this song, but it had its own journey as well, not from the original version and moving forward.
Well, yeah, look, you see that it, as Daniel was saying, it's been remixed and played so many times, and with Gaga then giving it another whole life, and you can see in the film, basically, she talks about just what that song meant to her, how much it meant to, the movement, and how important it was for her to, to sort of embrace that and kind of, bring it back for us again. And I think it also it speaks to, Carl was obviously very much, on the
Mhm.
ground, dealing with the AIDS crisis, dealing with his ministry, but his message, went well beyond that and touched so many people from the grassroots level to the mainstream to pop culture. And I think that's one of the things that I think we were hoping to try to do is just to show that this man's message went beyond what we might even know in terms of popular culture. And I think Lady Gaga does a wonderful job in talking about how his legacy still, is with us
Yeah.
and in that song.
I just want to remind our listeners that the film is called I Was Born This Way. It is going to be opening here in Los Angeles on October 30th. It'll be at the Laemmle North Hollywood. And it's also going to be rolling out across the country as well. And also, you mentioned Questlove. There's a slew of other high-profile people involved, including Jamie Lee Curtis, Billy Porter. In the film, we see Maxine Water. There's a woman who does not get her due. She kind of got trashed during the first Trump administration. I love seeing her because I did some political work in my past, and she's been a dynamo. I've always appreciated her as a politician, and she has always been just a wonderful person, a go-to person if you needed something. Dionne Warwick's in the film. You mentioned Lady Gaga. Just a terrific array of people to talk about the life and times of Carl Bean. And I really think one of the things about his life that resonates with me is that he was constantly trying to make the people around him better. He was constantly in that space. I mean, he wrote a song, great song, turned out to be an anthem, but just from every frame that he's in, he's this just gentle spirit about him. And the church did he start the Unity Fellowship Church movement, or
Yeah.
was it, or did
Yes.
he,
Yeah.
that was his? Is the church still there today? Is
It's
it,
still at the same place in LA that it's been now for like 35 years, 40 years. And it's branched out all across the country. They have 16 different churches around the country and internationally.
and he was the Archbishop, right? So does that make him the founder? Is that the way that works?
Well, he's a little sheepish about that. But yes, he's the founder and was the reigning prelate of the church, and so his followers asked that he be made archbishop, and he did so grudgingly.
So, in terms of his legacy, in terms of what he did in his life, what are some of the most lasting impacts that he's had? Wellington Love, what would you ascribe as his one of his many legacies, I assume?
Well, I mean, I think we could say everything from literally saving people's lives
Oh,
and, during the height of the AIDS crisis by making sure people had access to information, healthcare resources, particularly in the Black and Brown communities. There was so much fear and misinformation, obviously, at the time. So he really, I mean, he really saved people's lives. I think also another sort of crucial role that he played, particularly in the Black community, was he was a healer, and he sort of bridged the gap between young Black men, young brown men who were dying in their families, who particularly those who were Christian, who had a very difficult time accepting that not only that their kids were gay, but that they had AIDS, HIV, and so we taught the film addresses that and that he used his ministry, his faith, his blackness basically to help bring families together and in cases to heal. So I think that's a really crucial thing. And it's something that remains, that's still a thing, with Black families. So that's obviously a part of his legacy that I'm not sure that people fully recognize, beyond the musical stuff, beyond, because music was in fact his first love, but that again, that advocacy, that ministry, we can't underestimate what that meant and what it means today.
Sam Pollard, Liberation, the song that is I guess it's the flip side.
Yeah, it was the
I was
flip
born this
side.
way. Is there is there another life for that song, or I'm just trying to remember from the film, did it get very much attention when it was remixed?
Yeah.
There is maybe another musical iteration of Carl Bean's work coming to us soon, right?
Your lips to God's ear. We hope
Okay, so
so.
you're working on it. Okay, all right. Well, good to know. Good to
Your
know.
lips to God. I like that, man.
Yeah. Well, to all of you, thank you. Thank you for your work here. I Was Born This Way, again, just tremendously uplifting documentary film. Despite all the travails of his life, he managed to, through it all, be this sentient and uplifting person about everything that he touched. Thank you to all of you. We've been speaking with the co-directors, and that would be Daniel Junge and Sam Pollard, as well as one of the producers, Wellington Love. The film is called I Was Born This Way. Be looking for it. It comes out on October 30th. Looking for it here in Los Angeles at the Laemmle North Hollywood Cinema, as well as rolling out across the country, and I assume that means everywhere and beyond. So to all of you, thank you again. Thank you so much for your time today
Good seeing you, Mike.
as well.